Do you have a dachshund and have questions on topics like training and nutrition? Do you want a dachshund and need help locating a breeder or finding a great rescue? Did you have a dachshund growing up and want to share some funny or heartwarming stories? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to the Wiener Dog Lover Podcast, the place to be for all things dachshund. Welcome back, Wiener Dog Lovers. Today's episode has taken me a little longer to get out because it's a topic that I'm really quite passionate about. My interview today is with a veterinarian and advocate for our pets, Dr. Robb. Dr. Robb is fighting to change the way that our pet vaccines are administered and regulated. This is not an easy task, and for anyone who's ever tried to make a change, we all know that change is never easy, and often the ones that are trying to make those changes are hit the hardest. I truly commend Dr. Robb for his passion and his commitment to this cause, and I really hope that you enjoy this episode as much as I enjoyed doing it. Let's get into it. Thank you, Dr. Robb, for joining us here today in the Wiener Dog Lover Podcast. And thank you so much for all you do in terms of being an advocate for our pets. You have gone above and beyond for trying to change the laws around vaccines, from what I hear, at great cost to you. Maybe we could start off with what made you decide to become a veterinarian?
Well, for some people, it's truly a calling. When I was young, recently my brother was over and he was reminding me how when we were kids, there were snakes in the house, there were praying mantises that got loose, they were all over the house, there was, frogs jumping out of here and possums walking out of that room. In other words, I always had such an interest in animal life, and I would surround myself and my family members with animals. And so the interest was always there. And then, of course, it comes to a time where you choose your profession. And actually, I started out thinking I was going to be a doctor, meaning an MD. My roommate was going to be a veterinarian. That's when I went to California, Berkeley. Hung out with him for a while, and everything he said seemed to be right for me. And eventually, I made the switch, and that was my, major, became animal science, plant science, with an emphasis towards becoming a veterinarian. And the obstacles were there, like you said, to even become a veterinarian because it's difficult. But when it's truly your calling, it seems like no matter what you do in trying to run the other way, it keeps coming back towards you because it's what God would have me to do. So here I am.
And how long have you been a vet now?
I graduated in 1985. If I do my math right, I think that would be 34 years.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, well, as you get older, it seems less amazing because, time does go by fast. But no, 34 years, as you look back at it, it seems like, wow, that really went fast. But, a lot of experience comes through 34 years. And I'm grateful that I have that experience. And
we're grateful that you get to share it with us today. So thank you so much. You have truly made it your mission to be the voice for our pets in the area of vaccinations, like I mentioned. And maybe you could start by, when did you start to make that connection between over-vaccination and either allergic reactions or, tragically, even some pets having death, I guess, is the ultimate reaction. Yeah. What started you on this path?
Well, simply graduating and practicing what I was taught, which was that vaccines were safe, and we really weren't even taught about any reactions to vaccines. But then, especially with the smaller dogs getting a full CC, seeing them go into anaphylaxis, that was a very obvious thing that happened. After you've been through that a few times and you realize it's all the little dogs, you start also realizing that they're being overdosed because anaphylaxis often happens when you get too much of something, and then what really kind of blew the lid off was when we vaccinate cats, we'd always cats can be tough, so you sort of grab them by the scruff and just put the needle in right under the back of the neck there, and then all of a sudden, we were getting all these cancers right at the back of the neck, and it was very obvious that these were vaccine-associated sarcomas because that's where we gave the vaccine. So that kind of made it clear. And then, of course, other reactions that weren't quite as quick but began to be seen too, like hemolytic anemia and things like this. You start to put two and two together. I mean, if you're a doctor and you're observing what's happening, then the temporal response to vaccines become pretty clear. Oh, this dog was in 3 weeks ago for a shot, and this happened, and then 3 months later, oh, that dog was in about 3 weeks ago, and then this happened. And it just becomes clear that the vaccines are causing issues. So at that point, begin to wonder. And then the other thing, of course, is this whole idea, because when I graduated, it was every shot every year. That just didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. It just didn't make sense, that this was a 1-year vaccine, and at 1 year it would all of a sudden not be effective anymore, and you'd have to do it again a year later. Could they last a little longer? So that whole concept of being indoctrinated into these time frames, which really, it's incredible how indoctrinated we are, that because these time frames that are labeled on vaccines have nothing to do with the duration of immunity. They have all to do with having to give it again because the manufacturer is saying so and the veterinarian is saying so. So I would say, it was just clinical observation of what I was seeing that said, there's a problem here.
I think when I contacted you, I explained that I had that similar situation with my very first dachshund, in that it was many years ago. We did what our vet said, and we, vaccinated every year. And then she started to have reactions. The first time she had a reaction, she scraped her chin like almost raw. And then the next reaction she had, her head swelled up, and we had to rush her back to the vet for an emergency shot. And then the third time she had a reaction, she actually had seizures. She was 10 when she had those seizures. And at 10, I said, that's it. No more vaccinations. From 10 until 14, she wasn't vaccinated again, and she never had another seizure. I have had some experience with it as well. And like you say, with them being such little dogs. Now, how do they explain the fact that they get the same amount of dose, so that like a 10-pound dachshund or a 12-pound dachshund gets the same dose as a 120-pound mastiff? How does that make any sense? How do they justify that?
It's one of those things that the manufacturer says, give everybody 1 cc. I mean, that's all I can tell you. It's just the manufacturer says to do it. But early on, somewhere, somebody started this supposedly scientific fact that you're stimulating an immune system, so you have to give the same dose to every animal, no matter how big or small they are. But when I researched that, I could find nothing that supported that. In other words, there was never any scientific evidence of that. It was just one of these statements that somebody made and somebody repeated, and then everybody says it, but it was never based on any foundation of fact. So the truth is that vaccines are definitely dose dependent, and I could see that the reactions were dose dependent because it was the little guys that were getting all the reactions. And in fact, a study in 2005 out of 1.2 million pets studying vaccine reactions over the first 72 hours made a very simple conclusion. The smaller the pet, the more the reactions. And then the other thing was multiple vaccines given the smaller pets cause more reactions because you're getting multiple vaccines, more volume. So it was pretty clear clinically. But then the thing is, you're stimulating the immune system so you won't get a good immune response. Well, that's not true either, because when you measure titers, you find that the smaller the pet, all given the same volume in 1 cc, the higher the titer. So you're actually stimulating the immune system more, you're getting a higher titer, and you're also getting more vaccine reactions. So there's no doubt that vaccines are indeed dose dependent. There are other factors. There can be other factors, genetics, etc. But there were several studies, and they're on my website, where they made these same conclusions based on their studies. That's the deal. But here we got a law that says, the manufacturer says you have to give 1 cc to everybody, and the government says, then you have to do it. And as you know, when I was in front of the State Board of Connecticut, and I said, you mean I have to give 1 cc to a small pet even though it might kill him? And they said, yes. I said, you're crazy. I mean, these are veterinarians. They said, you're not living your oath. I have taken an oath, and if I know vaccines are dose dependent, I'm not going to overdose my pet because the manufacturer says I have to do it, and the state of Connecticut says I have to kill my patient. I'm sorry. That's where you guys lose and I win, because I have an oath that's greater than a bad law or a manufacturer that hasn't done the research to safeguard their vaccines.
Okay, so a couple of things going on there. Let's start back for a little bit. For anybody who doesn't know, because there are people out there that are unaware, what is a titer?
That's a very good question. And I'll start out by saying that the word titer means titration, okay? And titration simply means to dilute something down. When we test to make sure that a vaccine has in fact done what it's supposed to do, so a vaccine is supposed to stimulate the immune system to produce antibodies which circulate in the bloodstream. Those circulating antibodies would then neutralize the virus if the pet or person was exposed to that virus. So vaccines are meant to produce circulating antibodies. If we measure those antibodies with a blood test, that's called a titer. Now, the reason it's called a titer is because the way it works is they'll see if the serum neutralizes the virus by putting active virus with that serum. And if it neutralizes or kills the virus, they say, okay, that's a good result there. Now let's dilute that sample in half. Let's make it 1 to 2. Let's titrate it to 1 to 2. And now let's see if it neutralizes the virus. Oh, it does. Okay, good. Let's go to 1 to 4. Let's go to 1 to 16. Let's go to 1 to 32. Let's go to 1 to 64, and then on and on. And so the more that you can dilute that sample and it's still neutralizing the virus tells us that the concentration of antibodies is very high in that case. So a high titer means a higher concentration of antibodies. So a titer simply measures antibodies in the bloodstream against a specific, pathogen or virus. And the kicker is that if you can measure any antibodies at all, the pet is immune. So here's another one of those things. Now, you asked what a titer is, but the truth is that if there's any circulating antibodies, it will neutralize the virus. So a higher titer does not make a pet more immune. In fact, the higher the titer often means the pet's been more over-vaccinated, which means it probably has more health issues, but it's not more immune than a pet that has a low titer. In fact, it should be just the pet is immune or it's not. It's yes or no. But that's a titer. And I often tell one other story to back it up, which is just a true situation. If you want to work at a hospital, in my case, Danbury Hospital in Connecticut, as a person, they're going to want to do a titer for mumps, measles, and rubella. So in other words, they don't want to even ask you for your vaccine information because they don't care what's on paper as far as what injections that you've had. They want to see if indeed you're immune. They will simply do a blood test, a titer for mumps, measles, and rubella, and if you have circulating antibodies, you start work. Okay, they don't need to see a vaccine history because they know you have active immunity. So a titer is simply a blood test to measure antibodies circulating in your bloodstream against a pathogen that you've been vaccinated for.
Does it take a long time to do a titer? You would think that it would be a simple for your veterinarian to have you come in, do the titer, and give you an answer. How long does that process take?
Well, you're absolutely right. It should be a simple, what we call these days, snap test. So, they simply could have a test where when you put the serum into an apparatus called the snap test, and the antibodies are already in the serum, but they have the viral particles in the test. If they stick together, then the dot turns blue, and you go, okay, this guy's got antibodies against that distemper or parvo, or in case of cat, panleukopenia or rabies. And so it literally could be a 5-minute test done in the office. However, at this point, because of the fear tactics and stuff, they're saying, it has to be done in a special lab, and it has to be done with this test, and it has to be accurate. And so they make us send blood away for these rabies titers. Now, distemper and parvo for dogs, there are some companies making in-house tests at this point, and they could make the same test for rabies too. So anyway, right now we're kind of stuck with, okay, we'll draw the blood, we'll send it to a lab that runs the test, we'll get the results back. Now that, in some labs, that turnaround time is 7 to 10 days. The lab I'm using, it's about 2 weeks. Okay.
Which is not really that long a time.
It's not. I mean, if you can draw blood and test to find out that your pet does not need a vaccine that can potentially cause an anaphylactic reaction, tumor at the injection site, seizures, all kinds of things. I mean, 2 weeks to wait and make sure that you don't kill your pet. I think we can wait 2 weeks for that,
Yeah.
and make sure that the pet actually needs that vaccine. Absolutely. When these vets, they just act like, when I say these vets, there's so many vets that deny the reactions, and they'll, the titer tests are priced so high as a luxury item that they say, well, the titer's $350, or you can do the vaccine, which is $50, and they make it an economic issue rather than making the titers affordable and saying, well, they're the same price, so why don't we just test and make sure that we need this vaccine, because you can't go back once you inject that pet.
Exactly. We know that titers are an option and people aren't being educated, I guess. So that's kind of where you're stepping in. And as a result of that, your decision was you were adjusting some of your vaccines to make them size specific? Yes?
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, here's the thing. All veterinarians who've been out there any length of time, who've gone with 1 cc, no matter what the size, sees the anaphylaxis. And all of us start lowering our volume for small pets. I mean, it's an automatic thing. You're just not going to play Russian roulette with these pets, and the last thing you want to do is inject something that kills one of your patients. So we all lower our volume. That's just true. The difference between me is when I was, when Mars, the candy bar company, bought Banfield, so they had 900 hospitals inside of PetSmart stores, and 200 were franchises. It was called Banfield. Well, Mars, the candy bar company, has been coming into veterinary medicine. When they came into Banfield, they didn't want franchises. They're very controlling companies. So they said to all of us, well, we want to buy your franchise back and we'll give you this much, but they wouldn't give you near the market value. And if you said no, then they played hardball and they said, well, we're going to look in your medical records. In other words, they control the records, so they'd find something that they'd report us to the state board about. So in my case, it was the fact that I was lowering my volume. But the difference between me and other vets is when asked if they do it, they would say no. And I'd say, absolutely, I do. Absolutely. I'm not going to overdose those pets. I was sort of forced into, this situation through that process. But having said that, the Protect the Pets movement began. I formed this organization in 2006 to bring morals back into veterinary medicine. And certainly vaccines were a part of that, but they became the main force of the movement when I was hurled into this situation. And that's why I say it's my calling. It wasn't, when you have a calling, then God opens doors and closes doors in order to put you in a situation. But all he asks us to do is that we'll stand up for the truth, even when, like David and Goliath, we have what appears to be an enemy that's going to win, but we're still going to go forward with the truth. And that's, walking by faith. The reason you and I are talking is because I wouldn't take a plea bargain. I wouldn't lie on a piece of paper. I said, no, I have the right to do that. I do it, and I will continue to do it because it's my oath here, and that's what I'm supposed to do. That's probably the reason why we're talking now, because I refuse to bow down to money, position, or authority when it was forcing me to go against my oath and injure my patients.
Absolutely. I have great respect for that decision. I saw some of heard you on another podcast, and I knew that this was the same philosophy I share with you, and it really hit home for me. And I thought we have to speak out more and get this message out. Now, you did have to go to the state board. Is that what it was that you had to?
Oh yeah, I went to the state board. I presented 2 days of scientific studies. They didn't even look at one study. They just said, it doesn't matter. It's the law, so you have to do it. But I said, but what about the oath that I took as a veterinarian that says I must keep up with the latest research to make the best clinical decisions for my patient? What about that oath that I took? And they said, well, the law supersedes that, so you have to just do what the law says. And I was like, that's why I say, so they put me on probation for 25 years. And again, you have to remember, there's not one injured patient. There's no malpractice. There's no clients that are complaining about me. This is the Mars Corporation coming into veterinary medicine, putting veterinarians in front of state boards in order to steal their hospitals. I mean, that's how corrupt it is. But, unfortunately, there's corruption in the government and there's corruption in the state boards. These are veterinarians who are appointed by the government officials to do their bidding. This is a big money thing. You have to understand that. This is big money. The rabies shot forces that pet owner into that veterinary hospital every year, every 3 years, forces them to get licenses proving vaccination status. Then you've got all these animal control people and state veterinarians enforcing these things with their jobs being paid through this money. So it's a cash cow, and there's a lot of people making money, but they're in the power positions of enforcement, so they're not going to sit there and say, oh, he's right, I'm going to lose my job. They're going to go, because of a lack of morals, they're going to go with the money. And isn't that what it is? The love of money corrupts many, So, but the good news is we're winning, and we're turning this thing around through something I heard you say about the importance of educating other pet owners. That's the movement right there.
Absolutely. You mentioned quickly, you said about the 3-year vaccine. For pets that are receiving the 3-year rabies vaccine, what are they getting in that dose? Are they getting just still the 1 cc and then going 3 years? Or are they actually getting 3 cc's?
And this is another thing. The 3-year vaccine and the 1-year vaccine are the same vaccine. One's labeled for 1 year and one's labeled for 3 years. That's how crazy this is. And the other thing is, like I said, is here's how I'll tell you how they got labeled 1 year and 3 years. So if a company, let's say Muriel, comes up with a vaccine, they do a vaccine trial, and they show 80% efficacy. In other words, 8 out of 10 dogs didn't get rabies when they exposed them to rabies after the vaccine. And that was at a year. And they stopped right there. Well, they'll get licensed for 1 year. Now, it could be that those 80% were good for 2 years and 3 years and 4 years and 5 years, but they didn't go that long in the trial. They just went 1 year, so they got a 1 year license. Then they take that same vaccine and they give it to, some more pets. But this year, they test after 2 years and they test after 3 years. Now, they stop at 3 years, and 80% of the dogs were protected. That gets licensed for 3 years. It's the same vaccine as the one got licensed for 1 year. They just went a longer clinical trial. The point is, if they took that same vaccine and they went 7, 8, 9 years and it was still protecting, then it would be a 9-year vaccine. But they didn't go that long, you see. They stopped. So they get a 3-year vaccine, you see. And that's the joke here. It really has nothing to do with the length of immunity. In fact, they don't want to see how long it lasts, because the longer it lasts, the less vaccines they're going to sell. And that's the deal.
That's crazy. How is it, again, is this just because, somewhere down the line, someone said we should do it yearly, is that as humans, we don't get revaccinated yearly for anything, but yet we do it for our pets. And is that simply because of that somewhere down the line, someone said we should do this yearly?
Yeah. It's just because the manufacturer's got it approved for yearly. It comes listed on the vial for yearly, so the vets say, well, we have to give this every year. I stopped giving those yearly. I went to every 3 years in the 80s before there were any vaccines that were labeled for 3 years, without even checking titers. I mean, I just knew it lasted longer. I just knew it did. It's just intuitive that, you're sticking viral particles into a body that's the immune system's responding, and it's just not going to die off after a year. In fact, what's been shown now is that for many pets, it's a lifetime. And certainly the simple thing is to check titers, because, if you've got circulating antibodies in that pet's immune period, and I don't even care if you measure the titers every year to start off with. And then after, you see that, after you give a vaccine, they last at least 5 years, so why don't we check every 3 years? I make my vaccine certificates. I do immunity certificates, and I make them good for 3 years based on the research of how long they last. That's the deal. These shots, there was no science to support their initial recommendations of every year. Science was never behind it. That was just a political decision. It wasn't based in science. And so what's happened over the course of time, it went from every year to now, now you can give the distemper every 3 years, right? And then now we're starting to measure titers instead, but not for rabies, because it's the law, even though it's a bad law. And of course, with rabies, they just always use fear tactics to try to keep people from moving forward and stopping the insanity. In other words, Yeah, oh, your pet could die of rabies. You could die of rabies. Well, that's fear tactics because there's no science based on it. If they have a good titer, meaning any measurable antibodies, you can't give that pet rabies. Okay? And, of course, the other really crazy part to this whole thing is we veterinarians, we all titer ourselves. None of us want to get sick. In fact, when I was in a court situation, when Mars, after they got done with me there, to get my hospital, they took me to federal court, and so they hired Dr. Wellborn, who at the time was the head of the vaccine task force, and he was the head of the American Animal Hospital Association, and he was board certified, and so he got up in the stand and then said, "Oh, Dr. Robb's done wrong, da 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 da," and then I cross-examined him. I said, "Dr. Wellborn, do you give yourself a shot every 3 years?" He goes, "No." I said, "What do you do?" He goes, "I check a titer." I said, "Oh, you check a titer? Why don't you just give a shot every 3 years? Get a shot every 3 years of rabies." He goes, "I don't want to get sick, so I titer test." I said, "Oh, because the titer indicates immunity." He said, "Yes." I said, "But then you go right in the exam room and shoot the pet up without checking the titer." He goes, "It's the law." But I said, but you're on the vaccine task force. Isn't the task force supposed to be there to make sure we do vaccines correctly? And the judge was like, "Dr. Robb, I got it. In other words, he doesn't care if he kills the pet. He knows the science, but it's the law. So what do you say? It's a bad law. Okay, but nobody's doing anything about this bad law. As innocent pet owners go in and their pets get hemolytic anemia and die, or tumors at the injection site, or anaphylaxis, or rabies miasm where they start biting people, or chronic allergy issues, or whatever, and nobody cares about that. Because it's a bad law, we're just going to do it, and all these pets are going to keep getting sick and dying, and these pet owners are going to be bereaved because they've been betrayed by the system. This is crazy, and that's exactly what I said in court, what I said in state board, and I haven't stopped saying it because we've got to stop this insanity, and we've got to get these laws amended to reflect science and do the titers. That's what we need to do.
On that note, how do we get that started? What do we put in motion to start changing the laws?
Well, it is all in motion right now, okay? And what's in motion right now is pet owners taking action steps. And those action steps are as simple as writing a letter to your local representative and saying, "We got a bad law here, and I want it changed." Now, again, protectthepets.com is my website. If you look under download and share, there's a generic letter with the science at the bottom that explains the problem, but you can then, because so many pet owners have been injured, and that's where a lot of people take action steps. So there's a lot of them out there. And then you can just massage that letter, putting in your story so that you make it personal to your representative. So we've had already 8 states with active legislation. We've got one that may pass this year, and I'm not mentioning that state because when we've gotten a little bit too forward out there with this situation, certain forces that we thought were going to be with us started going against us because of the money. But I think we're going to break through very soon in one state. And once we break through in one state, then it's going to roll into every state because the truth will be out. And but action steps also are downloading some. I have a handout about, like you asked, what titers are and how they're performed and what they mean. So I have a handout on my website. So you can hand those out to people as you're walking your dog. And really, I didn't know what a titer was. Yeah, ask your vet for one. And then we have a petition for veterinarians to sign on our website that says they're on board with it. And then we have a petition for people to gather signatures to bring to their legislative body to show the support. We have a lot of different things that people can do to take action steps, but all these things together bring more pet owners into the fold who are taking more action steps so we get to that critical number that we, the people, win. And the minority, which is those that are embellishing their pockets, I call it the veterinary establishment, they're the minority. They're 40,000, 50,000 people, but we're 500-600 million people. So we're going to win as we continue to take those action steps.
I guess it's because it's not a federal law, it's a state law. So you have to change it with every state. Is it not possible to go federally?
Well, certainly, yes, you're right. It's a state law in the United States, and all the laws are a little bit different. But once we break through in one state, it's going to just go down in all states. But it can be addressed at the federal level in the United States? Yes, it can be. Congress can always start a task force to investigate it, and that can have. So writing your legislators who are at the federal level is also a good thing. We'll go wherever we can to get whatever support we can until we get this done. But the key thing is it's a movement of the people, okay? That's what it is. It's a movement of the people. I simply have legitimized it for the people because I know the science and I have the clinical experience and I've done more research in this area than I think any veterinarian out there. So I can legitimize it for the people. And then when they have seen the reactions where a lot of vets say, oh, it wasn't from that, even though they don't know darn well it was, then somebody says it was and is behind them. And that gives them the strength to go forward. And, of course, I've spoken in many states to legislators in order to legitimize it as well. So we're working together, but it's a people's movement. I simply bring the scientific information needed to back up what pet owners are seeing all across the world in terms of overdosing and over-vaccination.
And so other vets are joining your movement as well then?
Yes, we have a very good following, mostly of holistic veterinarians. But I'll tell you what, veterinarians are, in most cases, they're indoctrinated, but they're also in bondage. They're in bondage to the system. Many veterinarians that know it, they're lowering their volume, they're sticking needles, coming in and out without giving vaccines. They're doing a lot of things because they know it's wrong what's going on, but they're scared to stand up because they don't want to get in trouble. And that's the situation. There's so much money being made that if you do it, what happened to me will happen to you, which means they'll go after your license. They'll go after you. I mean, I had police sent to my house. I was arrested. I could go on and on. It wasn't just, standing up in a courtroom and speaking the truth. It was, I was handcuffed to a stretcher and taken to the psych ward. I'm telling you, these guys, they get crazy to protect that money. That's the problem. So the majority of veterinarians know the truth, but they're not willing to stand up and take the hit at this point in time. But once more do, then we because they're really a minority, but it's going to take, more standing up. If the changes are going to come through the veterinarians, I'm not looking to make the change come through the veterinarians. I'd love it if that happened, and we're trying, but this is a movement of we the people, we the pet owner. That's the movement.
Well, that makes sense, like you said.
That's right. And we got the power, and we elect our officials. Therefore, we put them in office and we take them out of office. So ultimately, once the people are educated, that's why one of the things I always say is I have certain, things that I put at the end of all my correspondence, but education is a big one. And then, of course, unity, and then drive the change. So that's the deal. We're going to continue to educate and take action steps and drive the change. But it takes pet owners to stand up too. They need to sue the state. They need to sue this. They need to sue the manufacturer. They need to sue the veterinarians. They need to do what they have to do, trying to be forced to injure their patients. Say, no, I don't have to do this. And you can't make me do that. And I'm going to take you to court if you try. They've got to stand up too, and they are. They are standing up. They're confronting veterinarians in the exam rooms, and that's what they have to do. They have to confront the veterinarian and say, no, well, I won't do that dental if you don't give that dog a rabies shot. Okay, that's fine. Then, since I've done a titer, I know my dog is immune. I would like my medical records because there's a veterinarian down the road who will. And that's the power of people then using their money to talk for them, because let's face it, if they're losing business, they're going to change. And so you take your business elsewhere.
Absolutely. Huge advocate for that. My veterinarian needs to share the same philosophies as I do. Otherwise, we're working against each other, and that's not for anybody's benefit.
There you go.
I liked what you said about the education and unity. As we come to a close, is there anything that you want people to know that we haven't discussed so that you can make sure that we get all of the information out there?
No, you've done a very good interview. You've asked the right questions. I think if people simply take an action step, which can be as simply talking to your neighbor about it, talking to the person on the street. They can certainly download information from the website. Every action step, no matter how small or big, is another straw that eventually is going to break the back of this situation and bring us the victory we need to protect the pets.
Perfect. Now, once again, Dr. Robb, where can people find you?
Physically, I'm located in Newtown, Connecticut. I do have an office now, and believe it or not, I get a lot of people driving long distances to see me, even staying in local hotels and things. The key thing is the website, protectthepets.com. I mean, my email address is there. My phone number is there. Also, without even talking to me, if you peruse that website, protectthepets.com, all the information is there for you to be armed and ready to battle those who would put our pets at risk for financial gain.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That was the perfect way to end. I appreciate everything you're doing. I appreciate that you're educating. I appreciate that you're advocating for our pets, the ones that can't speak. And I thank you so much for speaking with me today, Dr. Robb. I'm very, very thankful.
Thank you so much for having me on the program, and great job getting the word out.
Over the years, I've researched and questioned the overuse of vaccines, and I enjoyed speaking with Dr. Robb today. Getting the point of view from a veterinarian that's fighting really hard to make change was really enlightening, and I believe that what we think about, we create. And I think that if more people start to think about this issue, then we can really make a difference and give options to our pet parents out there. And I challenge you, if you're passionate about this issue, then share this episode. And not just with other wiener dog lovers, but with pet people, with your vet, with your dog walkers, with anyone in the pet industry, as well as head on over to Dr. Robb's website and take a look at the information that he shares there as well. There's a lot of information and a lot of things that you can be doing if this is something that you're truly passionate about as well. I hope that this was as informative for you as it was for me. If you have a wiener dog story, an event, or a topic you'd like to see us cover, send an email, bark@wienerdoglover.com. Follow us on Instagram, wiener_dog_lover_, or Twitter @lovingwienerdog, or find us on Facebook, Wiener Dog Lover. Never miss an episode. Head on over to wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe, and you'll be notified every time we put out a new podcast. I'd also be grateful if you would leave us a review. Until next time, wiener dog lovers, this is Lori, Sheba, and the Wieners signing off.